After 15 years of silence, he returned with lawyers and lies to claim the girl he once abandoned on my porch. The envelope shook in my hands before I even had the courage to tear it open. The county seal glared up at me heavy and official, like it already knew it was about to break me. Petition to establish parental rights. Ava Cole. My knees nearly gave out right there on the front porch. After 15 years of raising my granddaughter alone, every scraped knee, every midnight fever, every science fair ribbon pinned crookedly to our kitchen wall, the man who had vanished into thin air now wanted her back. Brandon Cole, my former son-in-law. The same man who, after my daughter's funeral, left a baby carrier at my door with a scribbled note that said, "She's yours now." If you're watching this, go ahead and subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. Whether you're in California or up late in Michigan like me, I promise you this story is going to hit deep. My name is Ruth Calder. I'm 66 years old, and I thought by now I had seen betrayal in every form a family could dish out. Turns out I hadn't. But before I tell you about the fight that nearly broke me and my granddaughter in half, let me take you back to where it all really began, back to the morning when fate decided to knock and I was foolish enough to open the door. It was early October in Evans Ridge, Ohio, one of those mornings when the air bites sharp and every maple tree on my block looked like it had been set on fire. I still remember the weight of the mailbox door. As I pulled it down, the squeal of the rusty hinge, the cool metal against my palm. Inside sat a fat manila envelope, its corners bent, my name typed out in the kind of font that makes you feel like you're already guilty. My neighbor, old Mr. Landry, was walking his dog and gave me a wave, but I could hardly wave back. Something in me already knew my quiet life was about to explode. When I slid the envelope open at the kitchen table, Ava was upstairs in her room humming to herself as she tinkered with that old hand-me-down laptop I'd bought off a yard sale. She was building some kind of program to help her classmates with learning disabilities. She never stopped dreaming up ways to make life easier for other people. The clinking of her keyboard drifted through the ceiling, while I unfolded the papers that said in cold legal language that the father who had vanished without a word now wanted custody of the brilliant young woman she had become. My first thought wasn't even about the court or the money or what it would do to me. My first thought was, how do I tell her? How do you tell a child who has spent her entire life being stitched back together with bedtime stories, Saturday pancakes, and the kind of love that runs on coffee and grit that the man who walked away now claims he deserves her? I remember staring at the family wall, every photo of Ava since the day I carried her home in a borrowed blanket. Her gap-toothed smile in second grade, the medal she won in middle school robotics, the way she posed awkwardly in her 8th grade dance dress. Her hand tugging at the hem because she hated frills. Each frame was proof of a life built without him. Proof of what love looks like when it doesn't run away. But the law doesn't care about photo albums or pancakes. The law only cares about signatures, dates, and names typed in black ink. And in that moment, as the autumn sun cut across my kitchen linoleum, I realized something. Brandon hadn't just come back for Ava. He'd come back because she was valuable now. Because her little project, the one she was building upstairs right that second, was starting to attract attention from people with money and power. He hadn't just smelled opportunity. He'd been waiting for it. I folded the papers, slid them back into the envelope, and pressed my hand flat on top of it, like maybe the pressure of my palm could keep our whole world from shattering. That's when Ava padded downstairs barefoot, holding her laptop like it was treasure. "Grandma," she said, grinning, "you won't believe who emailed me." And just like that, I knew the storm had already started brewing long before the letter found my mailbox. I thought the envelope had been the worst of it. Turns out the real humiliation was still waiting for me in the most public way possible. 2 weeks after that letter arrived, the school board organized a recognition night for outstanding student innovators. They were honoring Ava for her project, her app that helped kids with dyslexia learn through interactive stories. She'd worked on it in our tiny dining room wires, and old laptops spread out on the table, where I used to serve Sunday pot roast. I had ironed her dress shirt twice that evening, and when she walked across the stage in front of the packed auditorium, clutching her laptop like it was an award in itself, I thought my chest might burst with pride. Then I saw him. Brandon Cole, in a navy suit that probably cost more than my car, striding down the aisle like he owned the place. His hair was slicked back, his shoes gleamed, and beside him walked a woman in heels carrying a neat leather folder. She wasn't family, she was his attorney. My throat went dry. I hadn't seen him since the night he dropped Ava on my porch with nothing but a carrier and that cursed note. For 15 years, not a word. And now, here he was smiling for the cameras as though he'd been there all along. The board chair handed Ava a certificate. Flashbulbs went off. Applause filled the gymnasium. Then, as if on cue, Brandon stood. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice smooth, practiced. "I want to thank you all for supporting my daughter Ava Cole during the years when I, after losing my wife, needed Ruth's temporary guardianship. But now, as you can see, I'm ready to step back into my role as her father." My ears rang. Temporary guardianship. The room shifted. Whispers rippled across the rows. Parents turned to look at me, some with sympathy, some with suspicion. Ava froze on stage, her face flushed crimson. Then the attorney, Dana Rush, opened the folder and held up a document. "This," she announced, "is a notarized letter from 2009 stating that Brandon never intended to relinquish his parental rights. He merely entrusted Ava to her grandmother until he was stable enough to resume custody." It felt like the floor had opened beneath me. The paper looked official, embossed, stamped, dated. People in the crowd leaned forward to see. I wanted to scream that it was a lie, a forgery, that no such paper ever crossed my hands. But my tongue felt stuck to the roof of my mouth. Ava stepped down from the stage, her eyes darting between us like a trapped animal. "Grandma, is that true?" she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. My heart cracked right there in that gymnasium. Before I could answer, Brandon placed a hand over his heart, his voice trembling just enough to sound authentic. "I was broken back then, Ava. Losing your mother destroyed me. I didn't want you to suffer through my darkness, but I never abandoned you. I always meant to come back." The applause that followed felt like knives in my back. I stood there, clutching my purse, like it was a life raft, heat rushing up my neck, while the man who had once written, "She's yours," now rewrote our history with polished lies. My neighbor, Mrs. Wilkins, caught my eye from across the room. She mouthed, "Is it true?" The humiliation burned worse than fire. When we got home that night, Ava slammed her bedroom door. I sat alone at the kitchen table, the stage light still burned into my eyelids. On the counter lay the board's printed program, Ava's name misspelled in bold letters, Ava Cole, guided by family resilience. The irony made me sick. I wanted to march upstairs, shake her shoulders, and tell her the truth, that her father had thrown her away like a burden, that he hadn't asked about her once in 15 years, that the only thing he wanted now was the glitter of her success. But she was 15, and at 15, you don't just hear words, you feel the weight of who speaks them. That night, Brandon had spoken like a hero who'd come back from the grave. The silence in the house pressed down until I couldn't stand it anymore. I went outside, sat on the back porch, and stared at the clothesline where Ava's childhood drawings once fluttered in the wind. I remembered the winter she was 6 and insisted on hanging paper snowflakes out there, even though they turned soggy in the first storm. "They're still pretty when they melt," she'd said, grinning through her missing teeth. Now, The thought haunted me. Would she still see me as pretty when I melted, when the world painted me as a liar, a thief of her future? Around midnight, I heard her door creak. She padded out quietly, eyes red, holding her laptop close. Grandma, she said he told me he could get my project into real schools, that he knows people who could help me get to MIT. She paused, biting her lip. I don't know what to believe. I looked at her, my brilliant, tender-hearted girl, and swallowed the lump in my throat. Believe what you've lived, Ava. Who fed you? Who stayed when you were sick? Who clapped the loudest at every one of your recitals? That paper he waved around doesn't change the truth. She nodded slowly, but the doubt lingered in her eyes. And I knew then the battle wasn't going to be in some courthouse. It had already started inside my granddaughter's heart. The morning after that humiliating night at the school board, I stood at my kitchen sink, scrubbing the same plate 3 times without realizing it. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger, jaw-tight eyes, raw shoulders, slumped. Somewhere upstairs, Ava tapped away on her laptop earbuds and shutting me out. I couldn't let it stay that way. Humiliation has a way of hardening into something sharper if you sit with it long enough. By the time I dried my hands, I had made up my mind if Brandon wanted to rewrite history, I was going to dig up the truth he thought was buried. My first stop was the Greene County Records Office, a squat brick building that smelled of dust and old coffee. The woman at the front desk barely looked up when I asked about old notary filings. "You'll need to see Marla," she said, pointing toward a cluttered office in the back. Marla Duval was a blunt woman with steel gray hair and a collection of cat mugs lining her desk. We'd known each other since church bazaars back in the 80s. She once helped me find a missing tax form when my husband was sick. When I explained why I was there, she leaned back, crossing her arms. "You're saying he produced a notarized letter from 2009? She asked, skeptical. "That's what he waved around at the school board," I said. "But Marla, I never signed anything. Not one paper." Marla narrowed her eyes, pulled up the state's notary commission records on her desktop, and clicked furiously. "Here's something. The notary on that letter, Lyle Peterman, lost his license in 2009. Suspension for improper witnessing." She let out a sharp laugh. "If Brandon claims he notarized something after that, it stinks to high heaven." My pulse quickened. "Can I get proof of that?" She slid a printout across the desk. "Consider it a favor for the lemon bars you made me last Christmas." Clutching that sheet of paper, I felt the first flicker of hope since the letter landed in my mailbox. But it wasn't enough. I needed more. That's when I called Jace Otero. He was Ava's robotics mentor from the community center, a wiry guy in his 40s, always in flannel shirts, raising a teenage son on his own. He knew tech in ways I never would, and more importantly, he cared about Ava. When I told him about the notarized letter, he didn't laugh like Marla. He swore. "Ruth, send me a scanned copy. If that thing was faked on a computer, I can tell." I hesitated. "It's all legal stuff." "Will it hold up?" "Metadata doesn't lie," he said. "Even if a file looks old, its fingerprints give it away." That night, while Ava hid in her room, I slid the copy of Brandon's letter under my home scanner. My hands shook as I pressed send. Jace called me the next day. "Ruth, that document was created 6 weeks ago. The software version it used didn't even exist in 2009. And the typeface Calibri, it wasn't widely used in official templates until years later. He's banking on no one checking." I gripped the phone tighter. "So he forged it." "Looks that way, but you'll need more than my word. You'll need official eyes on this." I thanked him, and for the first time in days, my lungs expanded fully. Maybe I wasn't as powerless as I felt in that gymnasium. But as I pieced together my counterattack, Brandon was weaving his net tighter around Ava. She came home one Saturday, cheeks flushed, carrying a glossy brochure. "Grandma, I met Dad for coffee. He told me about a program he could get me into North Star Learning Initiative. They partner with MIT students, Grandma. Real labs, real mentors." My stomach sank. "He told you that?" She nodded eagerly. He said I could sit in on summer classes, that he knows people who could open doors for me. I wanted to tear the brochure in half. Instead, I forced my voice calm. Sweetheart, did you ask him why he never opened a door for you before now? Ava's expression faltered. He said he was grieving, that he didn't want to drag me into his darkness. She bit her lip. Grandma, he seemed so sincere. I wanted to scream. I wanted to show her the printout from Marla, the metadata Jace had uncovered. But she wasn't ready, not yet. If I pushed too hard, I'd look like the bitter old woman Brandon painted me to be. So I swallowed the fury and said, "Just promise me one thing. Whatever he offers, don't sign anything without me there." She hesitated, then nodded. But the doubt in her eyes told me the battle lines had been drawn. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table again, staring at the manila envelope. Only now beside it, I laid 2 new pieces, Marla's record of Lyle Peterman's revoked license and Jace's metadata analysis. Proof that Brandon's shiny letter was nothing more than a lie dressed in legal ink. I wasn't sure yet how I would use them, but for the first time, I felt less like a cornered animal and more like someone sharpening her claws. As the clock struck midnight, I whispered into the quiet house, "You thought I was weak, Brandon? But you're about to see what happens when the woman you underestimated decides she's done being quiet." And upstairs, Ava's bedroom light glowed under the doorframe. I wondered what promises he was whispering to her through text, what dreams he was painting in her head. He might have her curiosity now, but I had the truth. And truth, if wielded right, can cut deeper than any lie. The thing about hope is it doesn't stay pure for long. The moment I thought I had the upper hand, the system reminded me just how easily it could tilt toward the one with the deeper pockets. A week after Jace uncovered the metadata, a thick packet arrived by courier. This one wasn't stamped by the county clerk. It was printed on the embossed letterhead of Russian coal attorneys at law. Brandon had filed for temporary shared custody. His claim that my advanced age and limited income made me unfit to meet Ava's extraordinary educational needs. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the words until they blurred. Advanced age, limited income. As if love had an expiration date. As if bedtime stories and patching together scholarships weren't enough. When Ava came down for breakfast, I slid the envelope aside before she could see. She was already wearing the North Star hoodie Brandon had given her navy blue with their sleek logo stitched across the chest. She poured cereal humming under her breath, oblivious to the way my heart was cracking. "Grandma," she said between bites, "Dad thinks I should start spending a few nights at his place, just to get used to things." My spoon clattered into my bowl. "He said that." She nodded. "He has a bigger house, faster Wi-Fi, a quiet office I could use for coding. And Susan, his wife, she used to be a teacher. She really understands gifted kids." The words weren't hers. They were rehearsed, polished, fed to her like lines in a play. I forced my voice calm. "Sweetheart, those things sound nice. But you've always had what you needed right here. And Susan? She doesn't know you. I do." Ava looked down, swirling her spoon. I want to see for myself." It was the first time she'd looked me in the eye and chosen him over me. The legal pressure came next. My attorney, a kind but overworked woman named Ellen Harris, called me into her office. "Ruth, the other side, is moving aggressively. They're arguing Ava's talents could be stunted if she stays here. Judges sometimes lean toward financial stability." I shook my head. "Since when does money trump 15 years of raising a child?" Ellen sighed. "Since family court became about what's in the best interest of the child. And too often judges equate best with money and connections." She leaned forward, her eyes gentle but firm. "We'll fight this, but I need you to be ready. They'll bring in character witnesses. Teachers, maybe even Ava's counselor. And they're already planting seeds about you alienating her from her father." My hands went cold. Alienating, he disappeared for 15 years. "Can you prove he didn't try to contact you?" The truth stabbed deep. I couldn't. No records, no calls saved, just silence. Brandon's silence. And now that silence was being rewritten as my obstruction. That weekend, Brandon invited Ava and me to a North Star demo day at their new downtown office. "So you can see what we're building for kids like her," he'd said on the phone. I didn't want to go. But Ava's eyes had lit up, and I knew saying no would only widen the rift between us. The moment we stepped inside, I felt like we'd crossed into another world. The walls glowed with LED displays of smiling children holding tablets. Coffee stations offered free lattes. Every surface gleamed. Brandon swept toward us, his arm around Ava, like he'd never missed a day of her life. "Welcome to North Star," he said, his voice dripping with charm. Cameras clicked as someone snapped photos of us in front of a banner empowering the next generation. I stiffened. "Why are there photographers here?" "Oh, just a little PR," Brandon said casually. "The board loves human stories, nothing to worry about." But I knew better. That photo would be in their brochures by Monday. My granddaughter paraded like a trophy. While Brandon ushered Ava into a glass-walled lab, I drifted to the back of the room. That's when Jace slipped in, hands shoved in his pockets. He'd followed my text, "Come if you can." He tilted his chin toward a laptop display. "Take a look." On the North Star site, buried deep in the code, he pulled up a hidden slug impact ROI projection case study, Ava Cole. My stomach flipped. He's already selling her. Jace nodded grimly. He framed her as an investment. Numbers, projections, licensing potential. This isn't about family, Ruth. It's about profit. I felt bile rise in my throat. All the talk of Wi-Fi and quiet offices was just packaging. He was turning my granddaughter into a line item. That night, Ava bounded into the house, her arms full of free gadgets North Star had sent her home with. "Grandma, did you see? They want me to beta test their new learning platform. Dad said it's perfect for my app integration." I swallowed hard. "Did he tell you they're using your name in their business plan?" Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. Show her too soon, and I'd look like I was poisoning her against him. Wait too long, and she'd slip out of my hands completely. So I chose my words carefully. "Just promise me, Ava. Promise me you won't let anyone turn you into a product." She frowned. "Grandma, you don't trust him. But maybe I should be allowed to." The sting of those words burned all the way to my bones. When she disappeared upstairs, I sank into my chair. Jace's warning replaying in my head. Brandon wasn't just rewriting history. He was building a future where Ava belonged to him on paper, in contracts, in projections. And the courts. They might just hand her over with a stamp and a signature. I pressed my hands flat against the table, whispering to myself the only thing that kept me steady. He may own the boardroom, but I own the truth. What I didn't know yet was how brutal the next move in his game would be, and how much closer it would bring me to losing Ava entirely. The courthouse didn't feel like a place for truth. It felt like a stage. Marble floors polished until they reflected your shame back at you. Mahogany benches too stiff for comfort, microphones that magnified every hesitation. Ava and I sat side by side at the plaintiff's table, and though she tried to look calm in her navy dress and flats, I could see the tension in her shoulders. Across the aisle, Brandon looked every bit the part of a man reborn. Crisp gray suit tie nodded just so his new wife Susan perched behind him with a soft smile that made her seem like the perfect stepmother. His lawyer, Dana Rush, carried herself like a woman who already knew the outcome. Case of Cole versus Calder custody of the minor Ava Cole, the clerk called. Judge Whitaker, a stern woman in her 50s, adjusted her glasses and nodded. "Proceed." Dana rose smoothly. Her voice carried the practiced sympathy of someone who billed by the hour. "Your Honor, this is the story of a young father who suffered a devastating loss, the death of his wife, Emma Cole. In his grief, He entrusted his infant daughter to her grandmother temporarily while he sought help. For 15 years, he rebuilt his life. He got sober, he remarried, he built a successful career and a stable home, and now he is ready to resume his rightful role as father. She gestured to Brandon, who bowed his head, hands folded. Meanwhile, Miss Calder, though well-meaning, is 66 years old, living on a modest income, unable to provide the educational opportunities a gifted child like Ava deserves. We are not questioning her love, but love alone does not pay for MIT. Love alone cannot open doors in the tech world. Her father can. And now he asks for the chance. I wanted to shout. Instead, I gripped the folder in front of me so hard, the edges bit into my palms. When Dana sat, Ellen, my attorney, stood. She wasn't flashy, but she was steady. Your Honor, let us look at the facts. For 15 years, Brandon Cole had no contact with his daughter. No calls, no letters, no support. Not when she was hospitalized with pneumonia at age 3. Not when she won the state robotics competition at 12. Not even when she applied for her first internship. 15 years of absence. And now, after her app gains national attention, he returns conveniently with lawyers and a notarized letter that supposedly proves he never abandoned her. She held up a copy of the letter. But we will show that this letter is a forgery, and that his return has nothing to do with fatherly love and everything to do with financial opportunity. The courtroom buzzed. Judge Whitaker raised an eyebrow. Proceed. Ellen nodded to me. My heart thudded as I stood. My voice trembled at first, but I forced myself to steady. Your Honor, I am not a saint. I'm a grandmother who did what any decent human being would do when a baby was left on her porch. I raised Ava the best I could with second-hand laptops, late-night tutoring, and more love than I knew I had in me. But Brandon, he didn't entrust her to me. He abandoned her. And I have proof. I signaled to Jace, who sat in the gallery with his laptop. On the courtroom screen, he projected the state record Marla had given me notary commission revocation. Lyle Peterman, July 2009. This, Ellen explained, is the man who supposedly notarized Brandon's letter. His license was revoked before the date on the document, which means that notarization is invalid, if not outright fraudulent. Dana jumped to her feet. Objection, this is circumstantial. Overruled, Judge Whitaker said. Her eyes lingered on Brandon. Ellen continued. Furthermore, metadata analysis of the document proves it was created 6 weeks ago using software that didn't exist in 2009. Here are the screenshots. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as Jace displayed the file properties. Date created 6 weeks ago. Software version 2023. But the real blow came next. Ellen placed a stack of printed emails on the evidence table. These are internal North Star learning emails obtained legally through a state education request. In them, Brandon Cole writes, she read aloud. Once the case resolves, we can integrate Ava's IP into our district pilot. Guardianship simplifies sign-off. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Ava's face went pale. She turned toward her father. You said you just wanted to be in my life, she whispered. Brandon's jaw tightened. He glanced at his lawyer, then back at Ava. Sweetheart, that's being taken out of context. But Ellen wasn't done. And finally, Your Honor, on North Star's own hidden web pages, Mr. Cole lists, Case Study, Ava Cole, Projected ROI. He calculated her worth before he even asked this court for custody. The screen lit up with the page, Impact ROI Projection Case Study, Ava Cole. Numbers charts, dollar signs. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Judge Whitaker banged her gavel. Order. I turned to Brandon, my voice steady now. Would you ever have come back if Ava's project hadn't gone viral? For the first time, he hesitated. Silence stretched. His face, so carefully composed, cracked under the weight of the question. No further questions, Ellen said quietly. But Brandon wasn't finished. He insisted on testifying. Taking the stand, he clasped his hands and leaned toward the microphone, voice breaking just enough to sound rehearsed. Yes, I work for North Star. Yes, I was aware of my daughter's project. But that's when I realized what I'd lost. Seeing her brilliance, it broke me. I missed 15 years I can never get back. I didn't profit from her work. I only wanted to be worthy of her again. And if I prepared documents late, it was only because I was terrified of losing her twice. He turned to Ava, eyes glistening. I love you, sweetheart. I always have. I watched Ava's throat bob as she swallowed hard. The room held its breath. But then Ellen approached the stand. Mr. Cole, if it was only about love, why did you tell your colleagues that guardianship would simplify sign-off? Why did you calculate her ROI before you even spoke to her? Brandon's lips parted, but no words came. For once, the silence wasn't mine. It was his. The judge leaned back, tapping her pen against the bench. This case is far from decided, but what I've heard today raises serious concerns about Mr. Cole's motives. I will order further investigation into the authenticity of these documents and the business interests involved. In the meantime, custody remains with Miss Calder. Relief crashed over me like a wave. My knees nearly buckled, but the victory was bittersweet. Ava's face was still torn, her hands clenched in her lap. She had seen her father falter, but she had also heard him say he loved her. As we walked out of the courtroom, reporters swarmed, shoving microphones in our faces. Brandon kept his head high, muttering about misunderstood intentions. Susan trailed behind, her smile gone, her eyes stormy. Ava clutched my arm. Grandma, I don't know what to think anymore. I squeezed her hand, fighting back tears. You don't have to know today, sweetheart. But now you've seen who he really is, and sometimes that's enough. Still, as we drove home, I couldn't shake the image of her face in that courtroom, the flicker of hope, the sting of betrayal, the confusion that lingered. The legal battle was far from over. But one thing was clear, the mask had slipped. And once the mask slips, no amount of polished words can ever fully cover the truth again. The courthouse hallway smelled faintly of lemon polish and sweat, like desperation trying to cover itself up. The crowd of reporters outside pressed closer, their camera flashes bouncing off the marble. Brandon shoved through them, jaw clenched, muttering something about misrepresentation and context. Susan trailed behind him, but her smile, the one she'd worn like armor since the first hearing, was gone. She kept tugging at her wedding band, twisting it around and around, like she was trying to unscrew herself from his story. Ellen ushered me and Ava through a side door into the cool autumn air. For the first time in weeks, I felt my chest expand without pain. The judge had left Ava in my custody. Brandon's polished mask had cracked in front of everyone, but relief was fragile. Because while Brandon had stumbled, he hadn't fallen. Not yet. 2 days later, Ellen called. Ruth, I have good news and bad news. Which first? I braced myself. Good. The court has issued an injunction. Brandon and North Star are barred from using Ava's name, image, or intellectual property in any of their materials until the case concludes. That's huge. I exhaled shakily. And the bad. Ellen sighed. They've filed a motion accusing you of parental alienation. They're claiming you've poisoned Ava against her father. And the social worker's report? Well, it notes that Ava seemed conflicted. Conflicted. That word cut deeper than any accusation. At home, Ava moved through the house like a ghost. She answered me politely, but the warmth was gone. She spent hours upstairs, her North Star hoodie draped over her chair, like a banner of loyalty she couldn't quite put away. One evening, she slid into the kitchen, her eyes dark with exhaustion. Grandma, he keeps texting me, telling me I should think about my future, about scholarships, about how much easier things would be if I lived with him. She rubbed her temples. Part of me wants to block him. But part of me, I just want to know why he left. Why he thought I wasn't worth staying for. I set down the dish towel and pulled her close. Sweetheart, those answers may never satisfy you. Because sometimes people don't leave for reasons we can accept. Sometimes they just choose themselves. Her shoulders shook, but she didn't cry. She'd outgrown tears, and that broke me more than sobbing ever could. Meanwhile, the community that had once clapped for Brandon at the school board was quietly turning. The local paper ran an op-ed, Prodigy or Product, the troubling motives behind a father's return. At the grocery store, I overheard two women whispering by the apples, one saying, "Imagine abandoning your baby and then showing up with lawyers when she's worth money." But whispers didn't undo damage. Ava still had to walk the halls at school, still had to face classmates who teased. "So when's your IPO, Ava?" She came home one day, slammed her backpack down and muttered, "They think I'm just a paycheck with legs." I wanted to storm into that school to shout at every parent and teacher who'd bought Brandon's polished lies. But all I could do was sit across from her at the table, my hands folded, and remind her, "You are not a product. You are a person, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve your time." The biggest crack, though, came from inside Brandon's camp. One evening, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. When I answered, a quiet voice said, "Mrs. Calder, this is Susan Cole." My spine stiffened. "What do you want?" A pause. Then I didn't know about the emails or the ROI pages. Brandon kept me in the dark. I believed him when he said he just wanted to be a father again. But after court, I can't look at him the same. I swallowed. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want Ava to know her voice cracked. Not everyone in that house was lying to her. I care about her. But I won't be part of this anymore." For a moment, I almost pitied her. She had married into a story she didn't write, and now it was collapsing around her. With Brandon on the defensive, Ellen advised we move quickly to secure Ava's future. She connected us with a pro bono intellectual property lawyer from Columbus. Together, we sat in our little dining room, Ava's laptop between us, drafting her first licensing model. "No exclusivity," the lawyer explained. "You retain ownership. Any partnership is temporary, renewable on your terms." Ava scribbled notes, her eyes sharp with focus. For the first time in weeks, I saw the old fire in her, the girl who once insisted paper snowflakes were still beautiful, even when they melted. When the draft was done, she looked at me across the table. "Grandma, I don't need him to open doors for me. I can build my own." I smiled, tears blurring the ink. That's exactly what I've been waiting to hear. Still, the shadows lingered. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced for another motion, another accusation. Every time Ava's face lit up with doubt, I felt the sting of how close I'd come to losing her. But as autumn deepened and the first snow dusted the clothesline in our backyard, I realized something. Brandon had money connections and a stage, but I had 15 years of love sacrifice and truth. And no court, no lawyer, no forged document could erase that. The price had been humiliation, sleepless nights, and a granddaughter pulled like a rope in a tug of war. But the reward, the real victory, was seeing Ava sit at our kitchen table, drafting contracts with her own name at the top, her shoulders straight, her voice clear. For the first time in months, I let myself believe we might actually win this. Winter came early that year in Evans Ridge. By December, the maples were stripped bare, the sidewalks salted white, and our little bungalow smelled constantly of cinnamon and coffee. The courthouse hearings slowed. Motions trickled to a stop, and though Brandon's lawyers fought to keep the case alive, the judge's injunction held firm. Ava stayed with me. Brandon himself faded like smoke after a fire. North Star scrubbed Ava's name from their website within a week of the injunction. A month later, an investigative article revealed how he'd tried to leverage her work for profit, and the company's board forced him to resign for personal reasons. The same people who once clapped for him at the school board now avoided his eyes at the grocery store. I heard Susan left quietly, moving back to her sister's place in Cincinnati. As for Brandon, the last I saw of him was on a gray Thursday morning, stepping out of the courthouse alone, his suit rumpled, his eyes darting to the floor. For years, he'd been the ghost haunting our story. But in that moment, I realized he was just a man who'd chosen greed over love and lost both. Life at home settled into a rhythm again. Ava's laugh returned to the house, cautious at first, then steady. She finished the licensing model for her app with the pro bono lawyer, and to my surprise, small grants started rolling in. Nothing flashy, but enough to cover her travel to workshops to buy her a new laptop that didn't wheeze every time she opened 3 tabs. We turned the laundry room into her lab nook shelves stacked with wires, soldering kits, and the thrift store 3D printer Jace helped us fix. She worked late into the night, headphones on the glow of her screen spilling under the door. Sometimes I'd peek in just to watch her brow furrow, her fingers fly. That glow felt like the best kind of nightlight, proof that the world hadn't dimmed her. One afternoon, she came into the kitchen holding a printed email. "Grandma," she said softly, "the state's education department wants to pilot my app in 3 rural schools. They think it could help hundreds of kids." Her eyes shone. "They said they want me, not North Star." Me. I pulled her into a hug, tears stinging my eyes. "That's because you've always been more than numbers on a page." We never talked much about Brandon after that. Ava didn't need to. She had her answer. Not in the form of an apology from him, because that never came, but in the way he'd revealed himself. And sometimes, the clearest answer is the one that hurts the most. One evening, as snow tapped against the windows, she asked, "Do you think he ever really loved Mom?" I set down my tea and thought carefully. I think he did. But loving someone and being worthy of their love aren't always the same. She nodded slowly. "Then I'm glad you were the one who stayed." I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." The day the local newspaper ran a headline, "Teen Innovator Wins Right to Her Work," I clipped it and slid it into our family album. Right beside the photo of Ava's gap-toothed smile, the medal from her robotics competition, the snapshots of birthdays where the cake leaned slightly to the left. It belonged there, not because of the victory in court, but because it was another proof of how far we'd come. That night, I stood in the backyard, breath clouding in the cold, staring at the old clothesline. Years ago, Ava had hung paper snowflakes there, insisting they were still beautiful even as they melted. Looking at her now, stronger, clearer, unshakable, I finally understood. Beauty isn't about what lasts. It's about what endures long enough to shape you. If you're still listening, maybe you've lived through something similar. Maybe you've been told you weren't enough, or that love without money doesn't count. Let me tell you what I learned. Family isn't who claims you when it's convenient. Family is who shows up when no one's watching, when there's nothing to gain, when all that's left is sacrifice. Brandon once left a note on my porch that said, "She's yours now." He meant it as a burden. But he was wrong. She wasn't a burden. She was the greatest blessing of my life. And no court, no lawyer, no forged letter in the world can take that truth away. At its heart, this story isn't just about a custody battle or a forged piece of paper. It's about the quiet but powerful truth that love is proven in presence, not in promises. Many of us, especially as we grow older, know what it feels like to be underestimated, overlooked, or even replaced when others think we've outlived our usefulness. But Ruth's journey reminds us that the real measure of family is not who shares your blood, but who shows up when it's hard, when it's inconvenient, when no spotlight is shining. It's about the people who sacrifice quietly, who stay at the bedside through sickness, who tape report cards to the fridge, who carry the weight even when the world calls it a burden. For older adults in particular, There's a temptation to believe that money, age, or status disqualifies us from being enough. But this story says otherwise. It tells us that our wisdom, our constancy, and our willingness to love without condition are the very things that anchor the next generation. Success and opportunity may come and go, but the legacy of showing up day after day, year after year, cannot be stolen or forged. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear your own reflections in the comments below. Have you ever had to stand your ground for the sake of love, even when others doubted you? Sharing your experience might just be the encouragement someone else needs tonight. Thank you for spending this time with me. May you rest tonight with the quiet certainty that your presence, your love still matters more than you know. Sweet dreams, dear friend.